Stine Dragsted is a freelance journalist. She provides news and feature articles and commentary for a variety of Danish news organizations. I said to you just a few minutes ago, if I had suggested this would be a story you would be covering like 2 months ago, you would have probably said, what? How surprising is all of this and how it's just continuing to kind of evolve?
It has come as a shock to Danes and to the Danish politicians. And we've seen the Danish Prime Minister today say that she was surprised about the cancellation by the American president, and she thought it was unfortunate. She's also noted we have an escalating fight going on Twitter with Trump calling her rejection of his offer of buying Greenland nasty. We can see that she's trying not to get into that fight. Denmark is, after all, very dependent on the U.S. as its very important ally. And I think most importantly, what has been interesting in terms of reactions is this is a new prime minister of a left-wing government, and the right-wing parties have been very supportive of her rejection of this offer. And we've seen them go out even more forcefully saying that Trump's suggestion about buying Greenland is an April Fool's joke. It's a proof that the US president is crazy. So very strong reactions among Danish politicians.
You must be talking to your friends and family back there. You know, I know much of the world seems to be giggling about this whole episode, but this is serious business for Denmark. How are people reacting to it? I mean, just if I were to walk down the streets and talk to folks, what would they be saying?
I think a lot of people were laughing at the suggestion in the beginning, but when it turned out not to be a joke, it has been taken not just as disrespectful, but also as somewhat scary. Denmark is a NATO ally. They are dependent on NATO and on the US for its defense. To have a big power like that, punishing a country like Denmark for not wanting to sell the biggest island in the world, a big territory, is seen by many Danes as unheard of and quite unusual international development that we shouldn't just laugh off.
Here's something I wanted to talk to you about. This is getting a lot of reaction, even here in the United States. A conservative-leaning newspaper, the Washington Examiner, had this op-ed piece from Tom Rogan. The headline was, "Trump's idiotic, immoral, rhetorical attack on Denmark." And in it, he writes, Trump's words are actually immoral. Unlike many U.S. allies, Denmark has fought alongside the United States in both Afghanistan and Iraq. I'm not telling you something you don't already know. 7 Danes gave their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. 43 Danes died and hundreds more were wounded. He goes on to write that Americans should thank Danes for giving their sons and daughters' lives for our common cause. And yet Trump talks about not that, but how Denmark isn't contributing enough to NATO. How is that going to be received?
So I think everybody expected that Trump, after this spat, could get into the discussion about contributing to NATO. But there is this sense in Denmark that we've been extremely loyal to the US, that we've been contributing to the war in Iraq. We've been a coalition part in the fight against ISIS recently. And so this is not just seen as a snub, but it's also seen as a situation that could have provided a possibility of 2 very strategically important partners talking about new developments that are happening. I mean, Greenland is the biggest island. There are things happening there with natural resources, with how it's positioned towards Russia and China, that Denmark would have liked to discuss with US. And now this is all ended with this fallout. And with Danes feeling rather
Annoyed
by the way that Trump is now seeing them, calling our prime minister nasty, even though we think we've been very loyal.
I've got one final question for you. I mean, anytime you have a state visit, there's a lot of preparation, a lot of work, a lot of money spent, and clearly that was going on in the lead up to this. That's one piece of it. And then the other piece is he's not the only U.S. president going to Denmark. A former U.S. president, Barack Obama, is going. How do you think that might have played into all of this? Because people in Denmark are rather fond of Obama, are they not?
They are. The former U.S. president has already visited once. It was what you could call a love fest, I think, and he is expected to be received the same way when he arrives later in September, which was, by the way, a planned visit. Trump's visit was not planned. It was something that was taken by surprise. Danes have already spent a lot of resources planning this, and the cancellation, especially the reason, this issue about Greenland, which again is something that Denmark wanted to discuss with the American, which is something that is of importance. U.S. has a military base there. The ice is melting. It is sitting possibly in what will become a new sea where China has access. It is between the U.S. and Russia. So there were a lot of important issues that could have been discussed between these two countries. And now it's all ended in this Twitter debate.
It's a lost opportunity. Stine, thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it.